Hi, my dear friends. Some words of Torah for Parshat Vayechi. In the closing narrative of the whole Yosef saga, the Torah relates that Yosef lived in Egypt for 110 years. That's how old he was when he passed away. And he was blessed to see his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The Torah uses almost poetic language to describe how Yosef interacted with his progeny, and in the process seems to create a distinction between his interaction with Ephraim's children versus Menashe's children. The verse first states, Vayar Yosef le Ephraim b'nei Shileshim. Yosef saw Ephraim's third generation descendants. But then in the very same breath, it describes Menashe's family. Gam b'nei Machir ben Menashe yuledu al birkei Yosef. Also, the children of Machir, son of Menashe, were born on Yosef's lap. Obviously, and this is pointed out by Rebbe Avraham, the son of the Rambam, this doesn't mean that Yosef was in the delivery room when his daughter-in-law was giving birth and that the baby fell on his lap. It rather suggests that Yosef helped raise the children and sat them on his lap, told them stories, interacted with them, and so forth. The Torah seems to be creating a distinction in the way Yosef related to each of his sons' families. There's a big difference between seeing your grandchildren and having them being born on your lap. Furthermore, the Torah doesn't even name Ephraim's three sons. They are named by the Torah in Sefer Bamidbar, in Parshat Pinchas. Their names were Shutelach, Becher, and Tachan, but they're not named over here, whereas Menashe's only son, Machir, gets explicit mention in the verse. Implicit in this is a greater emotional detachment from the Ephraim grandchildren. Yosef sees them from afar, and they don't even have names, than from the Menashe grandchildren with whom Yosef interacts more intimately. Why was that? And why does the Torah deem it relevant to share this information with us? Let's look at this term, Yuledu al Birkei Yosef, that Menashe's grandchildren were born on Yosef's lap or on his knees. This term implies a type of tutelage of the child, and it first appears in Parshat Vayechi, when Rachel, desperate to have children, asks Yaakov to birth a child with her handmaid Bilhah. She says that in doing so, v'teleid al birkai, she'll give birth on my lap, implying that Rachel will be able to raise the child as her own. The second time this term of someone's lap being associated with children appears at the beginning of our Parsha, when Yaakov is preparing to bless Yosef's two children, Ephraim and Menashe. In a bizarre depiction of a touching scene on Yaakov's deathbed, after Yaakov has already embraced the two young men and kissed them, the Torah then relates that right before Yosef arranged for his two sons to be blessed by Yaakov, it says, Vayotze Yosef otam me'im birkav, vayishtachu le'apav arza. Yosef extracted the two boys from his lap and bowed his face to the ground. A number of commentaries grapple with the meaning of why and how Yosef extracted his children from his lap if they were already being embraced and held up close to his father Yaakov. But I believe the simple meaning of this text is that once Yosef understood that his father Yaakov wished to make Yosef's sons like his own sons, as he said, Ephraim Menashe will be to me like Reuven and Shimon, my own sons, Yosef was preparing to release his children from his own tutelage and place them instead under the tutelage of his father. Just as raising a child on your lap doesn't literally mean sitting them on one's lap, but rather raising them and guiding them, so too does extracting a child from your lap mean that one is releasing the child from that very tutelage. This would explain why Yosef bowed down immediately after as a sign of acquiescence to his father, as if to say, I submit my children to you, my master, my father. But then Yosef witnesses his father switching the order of his sons. Instead of placing his right hand on the firstborn Menashe, Yaakov instead gives priority to Ephraim. This disturbs Yosef, and he tries to right the wrong. Yaakov responds to him, no, yadati b'ni yadati, I know what I'm doing. Gam hu yihiyeh le'am v'gam hu yigdal. Menashe will also become a great nation, and he will also become great, but Ephraim will become greater, and his progeny will be famous worldwide. Now, as much as the commentaries discuss how Menashe took this blow to his ego in stride, it's important to consider Yosef's feelings as well. The firstborn son, who has grown up in your palace, has acted as your interpreter and right-hand man, is now being cast aside for his younger brother as the leader of your progeny. It's not an easy pill to swallow, especially after you've released your control over them to your wise father. And here's where we should consider Yosef's extreme sensitivity to the situation. He sees Menashe being cast aside as no longer the primary child, but as the also son. Yosef may have remembered the bitterness his own brothers felt at their being cast aside because Yosef was the favorite, and perhaps he wished to avoid another jealous enmity between his own two children. He therefore took it upon himself to reclaim tutelage over Menashe's children. Let me show them how important they are to me. My father Yaakov may have consigned them to being secondary, but I will compensate for that by making them my primary progeny. Yosef still saw Ephraim's children and got immense nachas from them, but noting how Menashe had been cast aside, he needed to demonstrate that in his own eyes, Menashe and his family were still number one. So he spent additional time with Menashe's grandchildren. And that's why the verse we started with notes that Gam b'nei Machir ben Menashe yuladu al birkei Yosef. Also, the children of Machir ben Menashe were born on Yosef's lap. This word also is added to emphasize that because these children were viewed as the also children of Yaakov, Yosef needed to make the extra effort in making them not feel like the also children. The Medrash relates that Yosef's son Machir was very careful to make a shidduch for his daughter with Yehuda's grandson, because noting that Yehuda was destined for leadership, he wanted to ensure that his descendants would become leaders within the Jewish people in the future. Perhaps Machir felt this subliminal message as well, that while his Zaidi Yosef loved him and treated him as number one, he would need to compensate for the secondary status that had been consigned to him by Yaakov. I'd like to conclude with a message to all the parents and grandparents out there who are hearing this message. We all know of children in our families who feel like they are second class. Of course, there are the overachievers, the ones to whom learning comes very easily and who breeze through their schooling. It would be so much easier to bask in those children's achievements than to spend more time with those who are struggling and feel like underachievers. What we learn from Yosef is that when we perceive that one segment of our family feels like the underdog, we need to bring them closer and make them feel more wanted and loved. I'll never forget my experience in London in June of 1999. My brother and I joined our mother for the 60th anniversary of the Kinder Transport. One of the speakers was Sir Richard Attenborough of blessed memory, a famous English actor and filmmaker. Richard's parents were very conscientious about helping war refugees, and it didn't matter where the children came from or what religion they were. They decided to take in two Jewish girls, Irene and Helga Bejach from Germany, who arrived to England on the Kinder Transport right before the war broke out. With tears in his eyes, Sir Richard said, "I'll never forget what our parents told us when we were taking Irene and Helga in. We absolutely love you boys, but we will have to show even more love to these girls because they are here on their own and without their parents. It is entirely up to you, darlings, if they stay." So many of our children crave and need our time and our attention. They need to be validated and reassured that they are indeed number one children and not also children. Please do not abdicate your role as a parent or grandparent. Your children's yeshiva will not be able to fill the role of a parent or grandparent, and it's not fair to rely on the school to spend that vital time necessary to not only educate the child, but to embolden the child to feel that they are worth being educated. May our efforts in embracing our children on our laps bring all of us collectively towards the redemption. May we see it, dear friends, bimhera b'yameinu, amen. Here's wishing you a wonderful Shabbat. Shabbat shalom, dear friends. All the best.